We're talking about homosexuality in prisons. And of course, I've done state and federal time. Not a little bit, enough to, you call it wino time. If you're doing, I would say people think like a 2 or 3 years or less is wino time. I've always said there's like 3 ways to die in prison. It's like safer than the streets. One is you gamble, you can't pay your debt. You do drugs and you can't pay your debt. Then you fuck with homosexuals. So those are the 3 ways to die in a joint. Other than that, it's like one of the safest places in the world. But if you go down any of those paths, just make sure that you got your shit covered. They would be on the street, and I believe them that they were always straight on the street. Mm-hmm. They were straight guys. Mm-hmm. But they'd come in and you'd see them fuck with a punk. They would mess around with a punk. Somebody that would act like a girl. Whoever the punk was, you would see a straight guy fucking with them, mm-hmm. right? And the guy would act straight, and he would think he's straight, and his group of, homies would treat him like he's straight, but he'd fuck with a punk. And I always scratch my head and like, you're not straight. And I say to people, and this is kind of like I was telling you, this is like a prison joke, is that, that when a guy, and then this is X-rated, right? You know that when a guy is hitting another guy, how they're doing it. They're doing it from behind, right? So then they call it in prison, they call it the reach around. So if you think you're straight and you're having sex with another man, and then you end up doing the reach, because we're not watching them do this, right? So then you realize they're probably doing the reach around, right? So now how you consider yourself really straight? Now here's the next thing, is that there's only, I would say that the percentage of homosexuals in the joint is the same as out here, which is not 50% men, 50% women. It's much smaller percentage of gays, right? What is it? 10% or 5% or 3%? Whatever it is on the street, it's the same in the joint, even at the higher securities. And I wouldn't say that people come out as being punks in prison. You can get punked, and that's a whole nother conversation. But that's a whole nother story. But what happens is that you'll see a guy, and I'll tell you one guy that I love him to death. He's from Hawaii. His name was Kimo. I didn't tell you this story. And I met him in '89 at FCI Phoenix. And this guy ended up with a murder case, and he was in the feds, and he was a beast, young kid. He was younger than me, and I was only like 24 at the time, 25. And Kimo was just a beast on the weights. He was like the strongest guy in the yard at FCI Phoenix. And just a man, just a Hawaiian, just pure Hawaiian. And, 5-6 years later, I bump into him, and this is when I caught my next case. And I look at him, and he looks different. I said, and he lost a lot of weight. And he's telling me he's being transferred. He was at Terminal Island. He's going somewhere else. He had some problem with the pump. And I said, well, no. I said, Kimo, don't tell me this, man. Don't tell me you're fucking with punks. And he goes, this, Mahu in Hawaii, you say Mahu, that means gay. This Mahu came on the yard, and she looked so good, and her hair was long. I was trying to fake my pidgin, but I can't speak pidgin. And her hair looked so good, and he goes, brah. He goes, she said, invite me to her cell, brah. And I went inside that, and brah, it felt good. And I'm like, oh, Kimo, man, you're fucking a man. Why are you doing that? He goes, brah, it felt good. He goes, I'm doing life. He goes, what? What the fuck? I'm doing life, brah. I like it. It's okay now. I'm like, okay. And so I got it, So you're going to cross over, but there's a lot of guys in that life, in our life before. It doesn't matter. We're going to do life. We'll never cross that line. It's not who we are. Yeah. You understand? So the other thing is, like I was saying, is like, guys that will walk down, and he's a perfect example. They'll think they're straight on the street, but then they'll cross that line in the joint. What are you now? So that's a slippery slope, right? That's my point about, now that's with a guy that is a stand-up guy. There's a whole nother story with men that come in, and you know, when you come off a bus and you land on a prison yard, you're called a fish, right? So when you come off that bus and you walk on that yard, if a guy is in the state, they know what neighborhood, you're a Norteño, you're a Sureño, if you're Mexican, you're a white boy, where you coming from. But you walk in, and if you're Asian, you're like, hey, do I know anybody? So everybody's looking at you, right? And you just came in, and some guy's been there 10 years, 20 years, or 5 years, 3 years. So everybody's looking at everybody coming off the bus. Everybody's looking at you. So the minute you see guys walking off that bus and how they walk, you can tell the fish whether or not they're going to be stand up. And I said this to people before. It's like you could look like Brad Pitt, but 100 pounds, with long, beautiful, and that beautiful face he had when he was younger. And if you got balls, nobody's going to fuck with you. And you could walk off that prison bus and be a fish walking across that yard for the first time, and you could be 220 pounds and fucking muscular, but the way you carry yourself, if you look scared and they put you into a cell with an old chicken hawk, and that guy says, hey, listen, here's some coffee, here's a couple of cigarettes. I don't think they sell cigarettes anymore. Here's some cigarettes. And, you know, even though you're like chiseled and 19 years old and 210 pounds and can fucking whip some ass, but the reality is you're fearful. Everybody knows it already. The minute you walked up that bus, they see your fear, right? So if you're like that and you get in with the cell, that old man, that guy would be able to whip in 30 seconds, will get in that boy's head and get him fearful that he can protect him. And within a week, that 190-pound guy will be sucking that old man's dick. You understand? Because he got in his head, because he got off that bus scared. You understand? So those are two entire different homosexual, you know, paths to take in the prison. And as far as I understand, those are the only two ways. You could be a chemo. You could be a guy that is, you know, that is regarded well with whatever group he's in, and he goes down that path, or you could be that other guy that walks off. And it doesn't matter if you're 180, if you're 80 pounds or 190 pounds chiseled. So yeah, that's the way I see it, and that was my experience. So.
Here it is. You see this? Yeah. I won my battle. I finished battle in my shadow. Yeah. I shot my arrow. It's time to think it over. I had to. Yeah. I touched that ladder. It didn't really fucking like matter. Yeah. I watched them gather. Yeah. Cause 92 is when it all shattered. Yeah. Born and bred, BK. One thought, get paid. Move work, catch phase. What more can I say? Be first in battle. Trust me, life matters. Raised up, no father, more like a Chinatown guy. Go shadow.